St. Kieran is linked with our diocese insofar as he studied under St. Finian, the patron of this diocese, at Clonmacnoise, which isn't that far away. But he himself eventually founded the great monastery of Clonmacnoise. I remember that St. John Paul II went there, and I heard on the grapevine that he actually wept of emotion because he sensed the sanctity of that place. So it became an important centre of learning. However, after serving as abbot for only 7 months, he died. But we have several stories coming through, for instance about this strange cow that he had, that always had enough milk for the huge community. Interesting that in these saints, nature is tamed. That rejoins the spirituality of the East, the Desert Fathers, to which actually the Celtic monks looked. Early testimony reveals the close link between the Celtic monastic movement and that of the severe desert of Egyptian monks and also Syria. I want to look at some things which we can glean from this. I was given last week this to read. It's a fairly new saint, St. Charbel, who died on Christmas Eve as it happens, but he was beatified by St. Paul VI at the conclusion of the Second Vatican Council as a sign of unity between East and West, for he was of the Eastern Rite, a Maronite. And then in 1977, by the same Pope, he was canonized. And of course, in the meantime, we had had this plethora of miracles. It's one of the greatest wonder workers of our day. He died in 1899, and ever since, all kinds of miracles have happened at his tomb and also with what is oozing out from his tomb. But I want to glean a few things because precisely in these monks, the purity of the desert is to be found. Remember now that he spent the last years of his life, many of them in very severe solitude in a hermitage which belonged to his monastery, up on the mountain with no comfort. And of course you know also that there was no photograph of him during his life, and so the Lord obliged us by giving us one after his death, when these pilgrims went to his place of penance and took a picture of the group, and there was an extra figure on the negative when it came out, and it was St. Charbel, so we know what he looked like. We also know that even in his life he was a phenomenon of the miraculous. He himself disappeared and always wanted to be the last. He always wore bits of other people's habit and so on, poverty to the extreme, always thought of other people, and never showed or displayed his learning, which actually wasn't indifferent. He was very well formed. And because we have some of his sermons, we can see his accuracy of thought, never wasting a word, but hitting hard each time. I quote here a few gems because it concerns us, and you'll see why in a minute. All human beings, he said in one sermon, are endowed with 2 ears to hear, but very few hear. Among those who hear, there are very few who understand. Then too, among those who hear and understand, there are very few who live in accordance with what they have understood. There are very few who are heading toward the kingdom, and the gate is narrow. And he's warning there against what is to become by now an accepted norm, which is not correct. We can't presume that heaven is given just like that. Even today, I understand, somebody not far from here, at the age of 29, was killed on a dangerous bridge near Kells, and it was an oil spill which led him into the beyond and propelled him from time to eternity in 1 second. We don't know the state of his soul. What we do know is that his soul was there and had to meet itself, as well as the whole consequence of whatever it's gained or not gained, in 1 second in which all eternity unfolds irreversibly. And then one sees what use was, for instance, all the energy given to, right now, what is becoming toxic, the likes of social media. In hospital last week, there were lots of good Catholic nuns coming and going, and one of them came out with this, knowing what I was. Just spontaneously she said, this social media thing, it's toxic, and she didn't have any time for it. But it's sucking in precisely our focus and our attention, our mental energy, and therefore displacing the center of attention to something quite different. And then, if one is propelled like that into eternity, one sees what it was worth. Very little, I'd say. In fact, I noticed in a forced rest there last week in hospital, and now again here now, how the disintoxication helps. Books become far more important. Conversations become deep and precious. One is living what? Reality. People out there are living virtuality, and their friends are on screen and cannot be counted on. Listen, understand and witness. Lend an ear to the Saviour's voice. Understand the truth and bear witness to it. Live it. Keep silence in order to hear and to understand the Lord's voice. Very few are comfortable with silence. They are fidgety in themselves. It's uncomfortable. The vacuum is too heavy. It has to be filled immediately. With regard to the equation, time and eternity, he has a few pithy thoughts on this, as a monk is bound to, living in the ultimate of solitude and therefore reality. For God, he says, the beginning of creation and the end of the universe happen together, in the present. If you sanctify the present moment of your life through love, you will realize the mystery of eternity. Now that's coming from the French, because in French he's writing, and réaliser in French doesn't mean to realize as we mean, it means to bring into reality, make real. Through love, man dwells eternally in God. And he goes on, sanctify time. Sanctify your love, or rather your life through love. Sanctify every moment of your life. Do not let the clock distract you. Now look at life, modern life. A great proportion of humanity is in this mode of fighting the clock. Is it not true? How much of our day is spent with one eye on the watch, trying to get there in time, doing many things by a deadline? It's actually sometimes of our own making. We don't have to do everything possible in our life. We might have better quality life if we chose and filtered what we get involved in. Do not let the clock distract you, because you cannot stop it. You can only be ready when your hour arrives. If anyone removes God far from his life, his mind and his heart, time will oppress him and hurl him into death. This does not mean that God does not exist. Rather, he himself is the one who no longer exists. In the purely monastic life, which actually, strangely enough, I find again in this little place here, which is far more quiet than my own hermitage when I'm alone here, because there is the sound of silence, no one knows I'm here, no one can get me or ring the bell. It is pure solitude, unchanged and undiluted, and it's a privileged place. We, if we want to, can claim it. It's in our power to create it, but have we the energy to do so? Are we able to switch off from this intoxication of the virtue? If not,